Welcome to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe in the studios of our flagship stations, 89.3 Lakes FM and Civic Center TV, on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99, where you can also find us in the Birmingham-Bloomfield area on Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and on City Cable 15 of Southfield. Join us live on Channel 10 in Waterford every day on the Media Network of Waterford, and live to tape on Channel 10 in Orion Township and Lake Orion on Orion Neighborhood Television or ONTV. You can also find us on the radio in the Birmingham, Bloomfield, and Troy areas on 88.1, the BIF, a service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. And find us online on our Facebook pages at Civic Center TV 15 and at Lakes FM, on our website, civiccentertv.com, and on My Michigan TV or MyMy at mymytv.com, where you can also learn more about downloading their free MyMyTV apps for your smartphone and smart TVs. All that information is on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can also find all of our programs on demand, as well as each individual interview as well. Then let's head over to our coronavirus page at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where we have links to the most up-to-date information on COVID-19 from reliable expert resources at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Oakland County Health Division, so you can stay up to date on everything you need to know about COVID-19. Also on our coronavirus page at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, we feature articles from many journalistic outlets throughout the state of Michigan in order to keep you updated on COVID-19 and other stories making headlines across the Great Lakes state. Our top story today from the Detroit News: Attorney General Dana Nessel is calling out the Oxford School Board after meetings with students and parents. The Attorney General called out the school board on Tuesday, a day after meeting privately with students and parents about what led up to the November 30th mass shooting at the community's high school. In a letter to the school board members posted on her office's Twitter account, she reminded the elected officials they have the power to provide for the safety and welfare of the students. Quote, "To put it plainly, the families you serve want transparency, and as board members you have an obligation to provide it," she said in the letter. On Monday evening, Nessel held a quote-unquote listening session with parents and students. Quote, "Though there were a wide array of opinions expressed, the overwhelming concern shared by all in attendance was a deep desire to learn more about what happened," end closed quote, Nessel said in a letter. In the letter, she offered for a second time to perform an independent investigation into the events leading up to the shooting at Oxford High School. In December, the Oakland County District declined an offer from Nessel's office to conduct a review of the shooting. Nessel told the board on Tuesday the costs of the investigation would be borne by her office, and it would be conducted, quote, "as not to interfere with the ongoing criminal proceedings," and closed quote, being handled by the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. She also set a deadline, quote, "In order to ensure you have the sufficient time to convene as a board to discuss this offer, I am respectfully requesting a response to my offer by May 20th, 2022. The listening sessions with parents and students in Oxford was incredibly informative," and close quote. She wrote in a letter to board members. Continuing on, the Attorney General wrote, quote, "Though there were a wide array of expressed opinions, the overwhelming concern shared by all in attendance was a deep desire to learn more about what happened," and closed quote. Last week, parents of Oxford High School students and one survivor of the November 30th mass shooting made an emotional plea for improved safety measures inside the school. Two parents accused school officials of failing to create new policies and procedures to make their children feel safe. They also said that they were angry that the Oxford Community School District hasn't hired a company to perform a third-party review of the rampage that left 4 students dead and 7 other people injured more than 4 months ago. Oxford School Board President Tim Donnelly was not immediately available for comment on Tuesday by the Detroit News. Donnelly said last week that a subcommittee of the school board is in process of vetting potential companies to do the review. Quote, "As we have more information gathered, an update will be given to our community in an upcoming school board meeting," Donnelly said in an email to the Detroit News. Parents are also asking for a public review of the district's current student safety plan and want full community input into an updated school safety plan for the 2022-2023 school year that reassures students, helps end learning loss, and fully addresses mental health issues. Recent threats deemed non-credible by police also have many Oxford families, students, and the community members on edge. Oxford Community Schools was among multiple school districts in northern Oakland County that received threatening phone calls on April 8th that law enforcement deemed non-credible. The district did not go into lockdown, which some parents challenged on social media. Lake Orion did lockdown, and Clarkston sheltered students and staff in place as well. On November 30th, 4 4 Oxford High School students were killed in the shooting. Hannah St. Juliana, 14 years old, Madison Baldwin, 17 years old, Tate Meir, 16 years old, and Justin Schilling, 17 years old. 6 additional students and a teacher were also wounded in the massacre. On Thursday, Hannah's father, Steve St. Juliana, and her sister, Raina, who survived the shooting, filed a civil lawsuit against the district and several administrators. The school had about 1,650 students in class on the day of the shooting, with about 100 teachers and staff, according to the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. In March, the district announced it will create a 3-year recovery plan and hire a recovery coordinator and an executive director of student services and wellness to address student mental health needs. Also making headlines on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus from our friends at the Detroit Free Press. The National Park Service is partnering with Michigan to provide more equitable access to national parks. Speaking inside of the Ford Piquette Avenue plant in Detroit, one of the hearts of the automobile industry, the National Pay System counterintuitive Charles Sams, director of the Park Service, said they go hand in hand. Transportation provides connection, he said. Quote, the mass production and relative affordability of automobiles transformed the world and made it possible for billions to visit and fall in love with unmatched national parks, he said in the conference on Tuesday afternoon. That was staged at the historic Ford plant built in 1904 as its first purpose-built factory, and where Ford created and first produced the famous Model T in 1908. The partnership aims to improve accessibility, affordability, and mobility for the national parks. There are 6 national parks in the state of Michigan: Isle Royale near Houghton, Keweenaw in Calumet, North Country, a multi-state trail, River Raisin National Battlefield near Monroe, Picture Rocks in Munising, and Sleeping Bear Dunes in Empire. Michigan's national parks are exponentially growing in popularity, Sam says. Visits to the Pictured Rocks National Park have increased by 130% in the last decade. And while appreciating nature is wonderful, Sam says the mass visits also present some difficulties. Quote, the central challenge of developing and managing the national park system is often providing access and protecting our treasured places. And we don't have those mutually exclusive advance both preservation and access in the context of rising inequity and climate change. We must overcome barriers that preclude our increasingly diverse urban and aging population from accessing the public lands, monuments, memorials, and historic sites. The partnership is still in the beginning stages, and specifics of how sustainability and accessibility will be improved are still to come, said Trevor Paul, Chief Mobility Officer of the Michigan Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. We will be rolling out innovative mobility technologies and services to fight back against rising emissions, rising congestion, connectivity challenges in transit and national parks across the country. But we're going to start with the national parks right here in Michigan, Paul said. To address those challenges, the state and the NPS, National Park Service, are going to reach out to mobility companies and innovators in the summer of 2022 to find solutions. That full article from our friends at the Detroit Free Press on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. I'll take a sip of water so I can speak like a human. And we're back. Lastly, making headlines on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus from Bridge, Michigan. Lansing and other police agencies rethink the value of minor, as they call it, traffic stops. In July 2020, Lansing police were told they could no longer pull over motorists solely for minor traffic violations such as a cracked taillight or an ornament hanging from a mirror. The department, apparently the only one in Michigan to do so, joined police agencies in other parts of the country, including Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Seattle, and the entire state of Virginia, that recently took similar steps as departments rethink the value of having police conduct low-level traffic stops, especially when they end in tragedy. The policies were influenced by cases in which black motorists were shot following vehicle stops, and as an analysis of traffic data show, black motorists are far more likely to be pulled over and searched than their white counterparts. The April 4th death in Grand Rapids of Congolese immigrant Patrick Lyoya, who was killed after being pulled over by a police officer over a license plate issue, has brought renewed attention to the debate over what kinds of infractions require police interaction with drivers and how they should be handled. The Lyoya stop, like so many others, began routinely. The plate doesn't belong on that car, the unnamed officer tells Lyoya, as the men stand outside Lyoya's vehicle, according to videos of the incident made public last week. Seconds later, Leoya breaks away from the officer. The officer gives chase, tackles Leoya, and after a 2-minute struggle with the officer's taser, the officer shoots Leoya in the back of the head with his firearm while straddling Leoya on a residential lawn. Police confirmed the only weapons on scene were the officer's gun and taser. The fatality is under investigation by the state police, which is expected to forward its findings to the Kent County Prosecutor's Office to consider possible charges. The officer, who the department has so far declined to name, is on paid leave. According to statistics, black people are more likely to be stopped in those routine minor traffic stops. Traffic stops are among the most common way in which the public interacts with police officers. Sometimes, though, a mundane stop can turn ugly very fast. A 2021 New York Times investigation found that in the previous 5 years, police officers at traffic stops killed more than 400 motorists who had no gun or knife and were not under pursuit for a violent crime. More than 3/4 of the unarmed motorists, like Leoya, were killed while attempting to flee. The Times investigation found traffic stops can be risky for cops as well. Roughly 60 officers were killed following vehicle stops over the past 5 years, over those 5 years studied. Those findings come amid broad evidence that black motorists are more likely to be subject to so-called pretextual traffic stops, where officers pull over vehicles for minor infractions, fishing for evidence of more serious crimes such as illegal drug or firearm possession. A 2020 national study of more than 100 million traffic stops found that black drivers were 20% more likely to be stopped than white drivers relative to their share of the residential population. Black drivers were 1.5 times more likely to be searched than white drivers, though they were less likely to be carrying drugs or guns. Grand Rapids has known of such disparities for years, including in its own police department. In 2017, the city released a study showing that black drivers were twice as likely to be pulled over by Grand Rapids police as white drivers and more likely to be searched than non-black drivers. The study was part of an effort to reduce bias in the department. See how that worked out. And Charles Anderson, president and CEO of the Urban League of Detroit and Southeastern Michigan, said it's time police departments reconsider their traffic enforcement practices in the light of circumstances of Leoya's death. Quote, there is certainly a need to reevaluate pulling people over for very minor problems, especially when they're impacting one race and these pretext stops where people have died, Anderson told Bridge. There, however, is pushback from police. Surprise, surprise. Such efforts have met significant pushback in the law enforcement community, with critics arguing that seemingly minor stops are sometimes necessary as a crime-fighting tool. Robert Stevenson, executive director of the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, told Bridge he's unaware of any Michigan police department outside of Lansing that has enacted a similar policy, that being not pulling over drivers for minor traffic infractions like a cracked taillight or something hanging from their rearview mirror. He said many chiefs adamantly oppose such an approach because it goes against the very purpose of law enforcement's core mission to keep the public safe. Quote, those laws were made for a reason, Stevenson said, naming several violations that could be characterized as minor or routine, including the apparent reason for stopping Leoya's vehicle. Quote, the reason we have two headlights and we have brake lights is for visibility, so people don't run into the back of your car. The reason we require a valid license plate is it's the law. The other reason is stolen cars. Stolen cars have improper plates on them, and criminal activities get covered up by improper plates, and closed quote. Matt Saxton, executive director of the Michigan Sheriff's Association, echoed Stevenson's view of traffic enforcement, saying, quote, if communities don't want to enforce laws, they should approach the legislature and ask them to change the laws, Saxton said. We should remember that the Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh was arrested at a traffic stop, Saxton said, referring to the 1985 apprehension of McVeigh by a state trooper for driving a car with no license plate. McVeigh was executed in 2001 after he was found guilty of multiple counts of murder in the bombing of a federal building that killed 168 people. That's all those articles on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where you can also find those ever helpful links to the CDC, the MDHHS, and the Oakland County Health Division's COVID-19 pages. We have a great program ahead on this Wednesday edition of the Oakland County Megacast. Coming up next, we'll talk to Barb Williams from the Catholic Community Response Team located in Pontiac. And then at 10:40, that will be followed by Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns from the University of Michigan, who was recently received an award by the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. That's all up next. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
A message from the staff of Michigan's Crime Victim Compensation Program.
Anyone can be a victim of crime
and suffer lasting trauma, physically, emotionally, and financially.
But you are not alone.
If you're struggling financially due to a crime,
we're here
for you.
Find out if you qualify for crime victim compensation.
Call 877-251-7373 or visit michigan.gov/crime-victim.
A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Victim Services.
If you are struggling to afford your internet bills during the pandemic, there's a temporary government program that may be able to help. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and it provides up to a $50 monthly discount on your broadband bill to qualifying households. Find more information about the program, including if you qualify and how to enroll, at fcc.gov/broadbandbenefit or call toll-free at 833-511-0311.
A public service announcement from 89.3 Lakes FM.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanting to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
We're pleased to be joined now by the director of the Catholic Community Response Team located in Pontiac, Michigan. Barb Williams is on the Michigan Megacast. Barb, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm
happy to be here.
Yeah, appreciate having you on the program with us. So first, can you tell us a little bit about the Catholic Community Response Team and the ways that it serves the community in Pontiac and surrounding areas?
Okay, well, the Catholic Community Response Team, we've been here for 18 years, and we do basically emergency services for vulnerable persons, things like solving their eviction problems and helping with utility bills, identification documents. So that's anything that applies to their basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, utility payments, those sorts of things.
What communities are supported by the response team? Of course, Pontiac is where you're located, but do you serve communities beyond that?
Our mission has always been focused on Pontiac. Pontiac, as you know, has a one of the highest, if not the highest, poverty rate in Oakland County. So the churches that formed us 18 years ago all surround the Pontiac community. So our mission, not only to serve the Pontiac community, but to build a bridge between communities such as Rochester, Waterford, Auburn Hills, Lake Orion, that we can kind of build support back and forth using time, talent, and treasure to help the Pontiac community.
Can you give us a little bit of a look into the history of the organization? When did it begin, and what ultimately was that spark that made the Catholic Community Response Team rise in Pontiac?
Yeah, well, you know, we started 2004, and of course, when we opened the doors, it was really just handling referrals. So we didn't have a big budget. We were just really here to disseminate information, try to connect citizens with various St. Vincent de Paul and other resources that might be able to solve their problems. But over time, we realized we had to do much more than that. And so we really rallied our churches and our parishioners. And of course, it spread from there to many social groups and other nonprofits to build a collaboration to really boost the situation here in Pontiac. We've got a new government now, and there's lots of jobs out there, so we're really excited about the future. But over time, when we started helping people just with their evictions and their food and their utilities, we really said we need something more. We need something to offer the citizens. So I think our big catalyst, if you will, was starting to offer a program called Getting Ahead, which tried to move people and does move people from poverty to self-sustainability. It's a 16-week workshop. We have one running right now over at United Wholesale Mortgage Sports Complex with about 15 students in it. And they investigate poverty. They investigate how it impacts their community. And they investigate the resources that will help them move forward. So a lot of our help starts with just one person who comes in who's being evicted because they had a one-time problem. They had a big car repair and it made them unable to pay their rent this month. But some people wake up every day and day after day and week after week, and they're what we call just living in the tyranny of the moment. And they're trying to solve their problem for the day, whether it's paying their rent, paying their utilities, putting food on the table. So for people who live just spinning kind of in the tyranny of the moment, we really recommend our Getting Ahead program. And I think that's the program that really catapulted us into more exposure and more meaningful commitment to the city.
We're joined by Barb Williams, the director of the Catholic Community Response Team located in Pontiac, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. They are one of nearly 300 Share Detroit-supported charities and nonprofits in the southeastern Michigan area. Learn more information by visiting sharedetroit.org, where you can look up information on the Catholic Community Response Team and other organizations impacting our community as well. So you mentioned one of your key programs in the Catholic Community Response Team over there. What are some of the other programs, events, and initiatives that are ongoing or will be ongoing in your organization that benefit the Pontiac community?
Okay, so ongoing immediate services we provide: food, clothing, identification documents. You don't have your birth certificate, your driver's license, a state ID card, you can't get a job. Personal grooming items, cleaning items for the home. Those are items that aren't covered by food stamps, so we try to supplement families that need those items. Longer term things would be preventing evictions. Preventing evictions help build stable communities so we don't have turnover in the community all the time. Security deposits for people coming out of homelessness. We help with their security deposit, a one-time expense. Then we also offer furniture. We provide furniture for the home, new beds for the children, and get them set up. We run a furniture bank as well. And then our special programs, besides the Getting Ahead program, we do back-to-school uniforms, back-to-school clothing and supplies. We distribute Thanksgiving. For the last 5 years, we've done over 1,500 Thanksgiving turkey baskets. We do Christmas baskets. We participate in early literacy programs with Great Start Collaborative in Oakland County. We have a bike program that provides people bikes to get back to work, people returning from the Michigan Department of Corrections who need transportation. So it's quite extensive. We try to fulfill the needs of whatever it is that people need coming out. A lot of our funding also comes from private donations. So we're not limited to government funding, which a lot of times has a lot of specifics attached to it. Specific income, specific qualifications, specific eligibility. Our funding is mostly through private donations and foundations. And so we have a little more latitude in the types of problems that we can help with.
We're joined by Barb Williams, the director of the Catholic Community Response Team, one of nearly 300 Share Detroit-supported charities and nonprofits in southeastern Michigan, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on Share Detroit's website at sharedetroit.org. Barb, if people are in need of some of the services or help from the initiatives of the Catholic Community Response Team in Pontiac, what are some ways that they can go about seeking those services from your organization?
Okay, well, all they really need to start is a phone call. So they can call our office. They can contact us through our Facebook page, through a Facebook message. They can contact us through our website, ccresponseteam.weebly.com, and fill out a form on that website, whatever they need help with or are looking for assistance with. So numerous ways. The Share Detroit website, they can connect with CCRT on the Share Detroit website. So we're easy, only a phone call away, very easy to contact. And they just basically touch base, and then we do an extensive interview initially to look at their total situation, and try to assess and make decisions on how we can be of service, how we can help them move forward.
The website again, ccresponseteam.weebly.com. That's ccresponseteam.weebly.com. The phone number for the Catholic Community Response Team in Pontiac is 248-491-9621. That's 248-491-9621. Barb, what are some of the key ways at this moment in time that the community can help your organization continue to provide its services to those in need in Pontiac?
Okay, well, obviously, there's always cash donations are always accepted and used wisely. We're very proud of our frugalness here. So cash donations, but there are a lot of other ways too. For instance, we put out on our Facebook page that we're distributing Easter baskets, and many local churches in the area answered the call and provided 20, 50, 70 Easter baskets. We do the same with back to school. We reach out to our network of churches and organizations to help us provide these school uniforms, and we have a great response with that. If you're a Girl Scout leader or Boy Scout troop and you'd like to do a toiletry drive, we would love to give you a list of toiletries that our families need and put packs together for that. So there are many ways that people can reach out to us that are not just cash donations. Through volunteering. We have volunteer openings, help with our office scheduling, answering the phone. We are almost 100% volunteer organization. We only have 3 part-time employees, actually. So that's why I say any donations that come into us really do go directly to the clients, because very low overhead, only 3 part-time personnel, and most of our work is done by volunteers who are trying to live out their faith and in mission in service to others. So volunteering in the office, volunteering with our furniture bank, volunteering with driving, distributing our food and clothing. Through COVID now, we've had to change, so we do all home deliveries now of our food and clothing. So take some drivers.
We're joined by Barb Williams, the director of the Catholic Community Response Team located in Pontiac, with us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on their website, ccresponseteam.weebly.com. That's ccresponseteam.weebly.com. You can also get in contact with them by calling their phone number at 248-499-9621, 248-499-9621, or sending an email to ccrt@ccrt-pontiac.org. ccrt@ccrt-pontiac.org. Barb, anything else about the organization that would be important for our audience to know at this time, or anything else we haven't discussed today about the Catholic Community Response Team?
Well, the other just point I'd like to make is that we do collaborate with a lot of other groups in the area. We're a community navigator for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So for people who just need to get online to their bridge card or renew their food stamps or file a request for assistance, we do that right in our offices here. We participate with the Michigan Department of Corrections Steering Committee for returning citizens to Oakland County, trying to get them, those who don't have a lot of family support and are recently released, trying to get them clothing and documents, food, to get them kind of somewhat situated when they're first released. And then we work with the Regional Chamber of Commerce here in Pontiac as well in terms of workforce development. We find our Getting Ahead program really speaks to workforce development in people who have been out of the job market for a while or have never really entered the job market, so that they are stable enough to hold a job. Because as you know, a lot of people can get a job, they struggle to hold the job. So we find going through our Getting Ahead program and feeling that they have more stability in their lives sometimes helps with those first jobs.
Barbara, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanted to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you did. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Joining us now on the program is the Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies at the University of Michigan. Dr. Coleman Burns, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to you, Tyler.
Yeah, good morning to you as well. So recently, at the last regular March meeting of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, you were recognized as one of the notable women for your in the county for your lifelong advocacy for freedom from all forms of oppression. First, congratulations on that honor from the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. What was your reaction when they told you that you were going to be honored by the board for your service in the community?
Well, thank you for acknowledging their award for me. You know, my first reaction was, how did they know that I was doing all of this? You know, of course you send in the bio, but it's really important to understand and to respect the communities that we show up in, that people are looking and watching who we are and what we do. So my first response was, well, thank you. At first it came from Marcia Gershenson, who was of my old district, and then by County Commissioner William Miller. So it was quite a surprise and very well received by me.
So you were chosen for an award in part because of your lifelong advocacy for freedom against all forms of oppression and violence. Can you talk about some of that advocacy work that you've been a part of, and what are any specific moments in your life that really drew you toward being an advocate for those that are facing oppression in our communities and beyond?
There are so many. So I will turn 75 this year, which is a big milestone. So that means I have almost 50 years of advocacy. When I started out, things like women's studies and Chicano Barica studies and Black studies didn't exist. And we created those. I started out at Wayne State University. And it was important because often we centered lives and views and perspectives that excluded so many of us. And so I began to do that work, starting out with violence against women and children, because in the days in which we started in the late 80s, it was sort of under the table. Folk did not mention it. It was a domestic issue. And to do that work, to get the community involved, the police involved, to rise to the occasion, not only of responding, but asking the question, where is this abuse coming from? Where is this hatred, this misogyny, this hatred of women coming from? And how do we address it? And so for 50 some years, I've been involved in that kind of work. More recently, maybe now about 5 years ago, moving to being on the board of Safe House in Washtenaw, and which was quite interesting to me because when I started out in the 80s, no one knew where the shelter was because it had to be underground, so to speak. And to move to see the progress that it is a public space in Washtenaw Safe House and supported by the community. those are some examples of my advocacy in that regard. And certainly around Black studies and women's studies, and now at the university, women of color in the academy and the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But please feel free to ask me and target on any areas that you would be interested in knowing about.
Yeah, certainly we've had in the last couple of years during the pandemic, certainly in the summer of 2020, a lot of these conversations, a lot of these discussions on oppression of certain populations. You mentioned women, but also the African American community, the communities of color, especially in the last few years with different forms of violence in America and right here in the state of Michigan as well. As far as those conversations have come in the past decades and certainly in the past few years, there's still a lot of progress going forward. And so that's why it's important to have advocates like you out in the community to speak up on these issues, but also to bring to light that these issues are far from being solved. So for you, what is your advice to those other advocates, to those young people that are also advocates for freedom from all forms of oppression in our community, to have their voices heard and to also support those in the community that may be facing these forms of oppression today?
Thanks for that question, Tyler. I think first and foremost is to connect the dots. Many of your generation, and I'm making an assumption about what generation you're from, have no sense of the history and struggle that has preceded to make sure that that history and that information is passed forward so that our young people understand the choices that have been made and therefore the challenges that now face us. The second is to absolutely be true to ourselves. We must show up as our authentic selves. So we say women and then African Americans. Well, I am, as Sojourner Truth said, I am a Black woman. The intersectionality of so many identities is important to look at and for us to work together. Number three, to make sure that voices that have historically been excluded, marginalized, othered, are voices that are heard as we go forward. Why? Because we find that when we include more people with different values and cultures, same values, of course, that we seem to do better. When we listen to each other and we hear each other, we are enlarged individually and collectively, because when we show up and that we is inclusive of all of us, then we are a better people and a better society going forward.
We're joined by the Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns from the University of Michigan, Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies and recent awardee from the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, recognized as one of many notable women for her lifelong advocacy for freedom against all kinds of oppression. And so, Dr. Coleman Burns, as much as we've seen progress in the past few decades, as much as you've seen these conversations and these topics and the oppression of certain populations in American society and in global society reduce in some cases and change in other cases, and sometimes in both ways over your years of life experience, and seeing what we're also experiencing in these current times, particularly on the cases of race and on gender equality as well. Do you have hope for us in the future that we will be eventually able to resolve some of these issues or find more productive ways to discuss these issues, to advocate for these populations, and ultimately to create a better world that is more equitable for all populations?
Thank you. I have two responses to that. I'm a living proof that we have done better. I buried the last of my father's and my mother's generation, my Aunt Cora. She was 96, and we buried her last week. But my father brought the whole family up from the South, the rural South, in the 40s, escaping lynchings, escaping oppression, coming to Detroit to build a better life. So number one, I'm a testimony that we have made progress. I live in a city now, historically, that was excluded Blacks and Jews. I'm living in a house that historically, because of redlining and racism, I can now live in. That's progress. The second thing is to understand that any oppression of me as a Black African-American woman also dehumanizes all of us. We have to ask the question, how has the way and the oppression, the invalidation, the assaults, the insults, how has it hampered the humanity of all of us? If race is a construct, not only is Blackness constructed, but so is whiteness. And what is that construct? And what do we need to do that we might show up and see each other in the integrity of who we are and the authenticity of who we are culturally and broadly? You know, when you look at, I look at the map of what's going on in Ukraine, and all around Ukraine, there are various nations, Poland, Romania, Russia. These are nations that have rich historic cultures. And yet when we get to the United States, we want people to ignore and forget who they are and what values their grandparents brought. So my message and my hope for the future is that, like I build up on the ancestors of those who come before me, that all of us will see the value of building up on that history, that ancestry, in order that we might be better than we started out being. So I have lots of hope. I've seen it happen.
We're joined by Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, a University of Michigan Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. You've been, for the past 30 years, an assistant professor of nursing and Black Studies. What drew you to the teaching profession, specifically drew you to college teaching, especially considering that these individuals that you would be teaching in these cases are so close to being leaders in our workforce and leaders in our community in the years to come?
That is an excellent question. I think about, you know how, and I am a religious person, how there's a burning inside of each of us, even you, and all of our audience members, and you have this drive and this thirst and you just can't shake it. And when I was a little girl, I would set up all my dolls in front of me and I would teach them. I would teach them because I love knowledge, I love information, I love the process of interrogating questions and thoughts and ideas. And so I came to the university, first at Wayne State University, in the beginning because I had something to share. I had a perspective and a rigor and a discipline that I thought would enlarge and empower young people to find out not who their parents wanted them to be, not who the world says, well, this is, these are the degrees you need to have, but to find the core of who they are. Because when we show up in our own passion and our own gifts, we are a blessing not only to ourselves, but to the rest of the community and to the world. So I love teaching. I love to see young people find out who they are. And in all these years, I was looking back over Facebook, you get to see some of those young people that you sold into 40 years ago, and they are doing well. It is a testimony of how we can, as a democratic society that includes and respects the diversity of all of us, that seeks to achieve equity, how we can be greater than we've ever been, or like Langston Hughes, be the America that we ought to be.
Dr. Coleman Burns, as you converse with your students, as you see the ways that their minds work, that they that they soak in the information that you're providing to them and the context of that information that you're providing to them and the connections between that information, whether it be in the nursing side, whether it be on the Black Studies side, or in general life experience that you are sharing with them. How does that inform your future worldview and your ability to look at the future of our society and have that hope that you talked about earlier on in resolving or better, more productively mitigating some of these man-made issues, such as equity and equality differences, such as oppression in our society?
So, number one, I show up in a space where I think students understand that I support and am true to my beliefs and my values. Therefore, they share with me a courage that generations before have not had. They are willing to be critical and to be inclusive, and they encourage me to show up and give the history and knowledge of what I've learned. So, for example, many of our students say they can walk into a classroom and know immediately if there's homophobia existing, that they will be excluded, or if they are to not raise certain issues, or if they're not, because those vibes are expressed in the classroom by our faculty. And they give me courage to call those things out, to listen to them, to work with students, to figure out a way that they can be their authentic selves and create and be the leaders for the future that they know they are inheriting. And so what I find in the classroom is, one, they're surprised in the first place that I am at all technologically literate, because they see my gray hair and then they get concerned. But I listen to them. And they keep me alive, and I feed back into them. And one thing they know about Dr. Coleman Burns, they call me PCB, is that I will show up for them whenever I am needed by them, listening, hearing what they have to say, and in many cases, not only advocating in the community, in the grassroots community, but advocating for them in the classroom. And they know that I'll do that.
Dr. Coleman Burns, earlier on, you had mentioned how your faith helps to inform your advocacy work, how it helps to inform your teaching work as well. For the past 20 years, you've been a minister at the First African Methodist Episcopal Church of Farmington Hills. For the past 3 years, you've been serving as their senior pastor. What sort of fulfillment do you get out of that role in your church community, too, that mirrors or is similar or parallels the satisfaction you get from your advocacy work and your teaching work?
That is a great question. Because of my faith, I know it's not about me. I know I'm not the center of the universe. Because of my faith, I get up each morning with the belief and the idea that the manifestation of the God that I serve is possible in all people. Let me say it another way. I'm just a human being, very frail. And because of my faith, I can have forgiveness. I can deal with any of my hurt or harm that I've experienced in my 74 years of living, and that I can see the love and possibility in all people, whether they see it in themselves or not. And so it's been quite fulfilling to be in a community that respects the work of truth and reconciliation and honesty. And so I do indeed believe that it is this connection between who we are beyond our lives here in this space and the legacy that we can leave behind, and the way in which we show and demonstrate love and build a beloved community.
Dr. Coleman Burns, before we let you go, anything else that you'd like to say today that we haven't talked about, or any lasting words of advice for those out in the community at this time?
I think we're in a very dangerous period where if we don't look and seek for knowledge and truth and listening, that we need to listen to people who are very different from us and hear and not come up with some predetermined platform, that we can then become a beloved community. And that is what my wish and my vision is as we move forward. So thank you so much, Tyler, for your hosting and for your questions, very thoughtful, and for leading us in this discussion. You have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Whether you're the city,
the county,
or the Huron River Watershed Council.
As partners working together to protect our water resources, we agree.
Pet waste is the source of harmful bacteria in the Huron River.
When it's left on the ground, it can wash into the storm drains.
These lead directly to our streams. No filters, no treatment.
Here's one thing we know that can help keep our water clean.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
So pick up pet waste and trash it.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
Now is the CEO of Michigan Works Association. Ryan Hunt is with us now on the Michigan Megacast. Ryan, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Tyler. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Yeah, good to have you with us as well. So let's start off. For those that may be unfamiliar, can you tell us what the Michigan Works Association is and what it does to help workforce development in the state of Michigan, but also to help and advocate for workers in the state of Michigan?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Michigan Works Association, we are a nonprofit based in Lansing, and you may have heard of the Michigan Works system in Michigan. Hopefully many of the viewers today are familiar with their local Michigan Works office. There are 16 Michigan Works agencies throughout the state of Michigan, strategically located throughout all corners of the state. Those 16 Michigan Works agencies have 66 service centers and 33 one-stop centers that are all physical locations throughout the state. And those facilities and the staff that are there in those buildings are there to serve both job seekers in our communities and employers who are looking to hire individuals each day in a range of industries, a range of occupations. So if you're looking for job seeker support, or if you're an employer looking to make some hires in your local community, the Michigan Works office, you can really think of it as an extension of your HR team, there to support the hiring and the employability skills and the upskilling of our workforce here in the state of Michigan. And so the Michigan Works Association represents those 16 Michigan Works offices across the state. And we do that in three key buckets. The first bucket is primarily legislative advocacy at the federal and the state level. We recognize that workforce development is going to be a key component in ensuring that the state of Michigan remains on the right track toward long-term economic resiliency, especially as we hopefully start coming out of the pandemic a little bit more here in the coming months. We also focus on professional development. We host a number of workshops and training sessions for frontline Michigan Works staff at each of those 16 agencies across the state on an annual basis. We have a few that are actually going on this week. And then we also focus on raising the visibility of the workforce system in Michigan, and we do so through a number of key events throughout the year. We just had our annual Impact Awards in Lansing in late March, just a few weeks ago, where we had a winner from each of the 16 Michigan Works agencies. Some of them were employers, some of them were employees of companies in our communities, some were job seekers or community partners. And so through those efforts and awarding and recognizing those individual contributors to our economy, we're raising the visibility of all the things that our workforce system here in Michigan can accomplish through the Michigan Works system. And then we also have our annual conference coming up September 11th through the 13th at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort in Mount Pleasant. That'll be our first in-person annual conference in over 2 years.
So Ryan, at this moment in time, given that, as you said, we're starting to, especially economically, come out from the throes of the pandemic, and socially and societally in Michigan and the U.S., across the world, we're seeing things sort of transition away from pandemic-era behaviors and pandemic-era precautions as of now. and that could change. But at this moment in time, where is Michigan economically, and especially with the job market in terms of availability, in terms of what is open, and in terms of what's being looked for in an employee by many of the companies that have these job openings?
Yep, great question. There's some good news and some bad news, right? The good news is Michigan's economic recovery from the pandemic continues to, I think, exceed expectations from many of us who have been living through and working with both employers and job seekers the last couple of years just to keep them engaged in the economy, make sure that the businesses have the right folks to hire, but also the job seekers have the right skills and the right resources to get into positions that are of higher wage quality, maybe an opportunity for them to continue upskilling themselves and being able to raise a family and support themselves in their community. So the good news is, again, the economy in Michigan continues to rebound quite extraordinarily. The bad news, however, is here in Michigan, we have a lower than average labor force participation rate when you look across the national economy right now. And that's due to a number of factors. Right here in Michigan, for example, the hospitality industry was one of the hardest hit industries in Michigan. And when you compare that to the hospitality industry across the entire nation, Michigan saw a rather dramatic effect in a negative fashion as a result of the pandemic, especially early on, in the spring and summer months of 2020. That has continued to rebound. However, we're still seeing a number of job openings in some of those areas in the hospitality industry in Michigan. And just as well as anybody, Tyler, we rely heavily on our tourism industry, not just in the summer months with beautiful northern Michigan. If you go to Traverse City or Alpena and you enjoy the beaches and the wonderful tourist destinations, but it's really a year-round tourist attraction for individuals, not just in the U.S., but globally as well. So we're doing all that we can to help support those workers in the hospitality industry and working with other partners like at the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association to help out with that industry. So the more that we can do to help increase the labor force participation rates in Michigan, we're happy to partner with other public stakeholders like the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and also private stakeholders and companies to ensure that when they're looking for eligible qualified workers, they have the right resources in place. Maybe there's some federal or some state assistance they can tap into to help hire different populations, such as those who may have been previously incarcerated that are now returning to work, maybe individuals with disabilities, just trying to overturn any leaf that they can in order to find that qualified talent here in Michigan in order to raise those labor force participation rates.
We're joined by Ryan Hunt, the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Works Association, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on their website, michiganworks.org. That's michiganworks.org. For those who aren't qualified for certain jobs, what do you recommend to become more skilled or to put themselves in a more advantageous position to acquire some of these open jobs that they may be seeking at this time, whether they are currently at another job and continue to labor at that job, or are out of the job market at this point, maybe on unemployment or an expired unemployment?
Great question. What we're seeing right now, and this is not just here in Michigan, this is really nationally and in many cases globally, especially in some of our competing countries across the entire world. It's going to take a more educated, more qualified, better skilled workforce in order for us to compete in a 21st century global economy, especially in some of the driving industries like advanced manufacturing and technology. We're the state that put the world on wheels, and in order for us to continue maximizing our potential and winning the future in many of these driving industries, we know that we need folks who have more than just a high school diploma. We need people with post-secondary credentials. It may not necessarily be an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, but we need folks with the right credentials and the right certifications in order for Michigan to remain globally competitive and globally relevant for that matter. And so you may have heard of Governor Whitmer's 60 by 30 initiative. And the goal there is by 2030, 60% of working age adults in Michigan to have some type of post-secondary degree or credential. And what we're seeing, if you look at the state's top 50 hot jobs through 2028, the bulk of those jobs are going to require some type of post-secondary credential or post-secondary degree. And so what we're encouraging individuals is to contact their local Michigan Works office in their community. You can get hooked up with a number of individuals who are the frontline staff there, and day in and day out, they're helping to serve as career coaches for job seekers and helping them align their passions and their interests with in-demand jobs of the future by upskilling themselves, looking for not only the technical skills that individuals need, but also the employability skills, or what's oftentimes referenced as soft skills. You think of time management, the ability to work in a team environment. Those are critical skills right now that can help set individuals apart from the rest of the competition if they're looking for new employment opportunities. And again, by engaging with their local Michigan Works office, there's a number of resources that individuals can tap into that can help offset the cost or maybe even eliminate the cost altogether for upskilling opportunities.
On the other side of that coin, you have these employers that are looking to fill a lot of these jobs. In some cases, they have a massive openings in their companies, in certain departments of their companies, certainly in certain industries. Like you had said, you mentioned hospitality in particular is really hurting for employees at this time. You were quoted recently in a Detroit Free Press article that focused on the so-called Great Resignation, particularly focusing on restaurant workers, those in hospitality, restaurant workers, those working in hotels, and so on. And which you referred to that situation as the, quote, great upgrade, not great resignation. What do you mean by that, and how does that context play into what employers should be focusing on at this point to fill some of those job openings, given the current state of our market?
Sure. Yeah, when I mentioned the great upgrade, we've heard the phrase over the last couple of years, the great resignation. And I think when people hear that, they think people are just sitting on the sidelines, not willing to re-engage in the economy. It's primarily impacting middle income to higher income white collar workers who are now resigning their positions and either not re-engaging the economy or being very cautious about what they're going to do for their next career opportunity. What we're seeing in the information from here in Michigan and across the country is it's really should be the great upgrade is what it probably should be called, because that dynamic is more heavily impacting lower wage workers who may be looking for the next opportunity, and they may be leaving for a job that pays 50 cents an hour more or $1 an hour or more down the street, or they're looking for opportunities to re-engage in the economy in a different occupation in a different industry entirely. We've seen individuals that are leaving certain industries here in Michigan and across the U.S. and they're pursuing industries or occupations that are more in demand, that lead to higher wage, higher skilled positions. And so what we're doing right now in coordination with our Michigan Works agencies and our private sector audience throughout the state of Michigan is we're encouraging companies to look at ways that they can help either retain and or attract new employees into their company. And some of the ways that they can do that is by enhancing the corporate culture within their company, not just focusing on increasing wages. We have seen wages increase quite a bit through the course of the pandemic, especially in certain industries like the hospitality industry. But there's only so much that a private sector company can do to increase wages before that really starts to eat into their bottom line. But there are many other things that they can do in order to help enhance that corporate culture. Part of it, we've talked a little today about upskilling and training. Individuals and workers are looking for companies that are interested in not just having them come in and do the job 9 to 5, but they want a company that's going to make that recurring investment in their professional development. So upskilling and training is a great way for companies to show that return on investment for the individual workers that they have at their company. We're also seeing that cross training and job shadowing into different departments or different areas of a company can also help lead to long-term retention of employees, especially if you have a company who's starting at maybe the ground level on the production floor, but they want to move into a management position. Are there things that the company can be doing in the near term to help individuals get into some type of management track, whether that's in-house training or taking some courses at the local community college that are geared toward what the individual wants to do long-term? So the better long-term outlook that companies have in investing in their employees, we're seeing those companies are having better retention and attraction rates compared to their counterparts who may not be investing as much in those upskilling opportunities for their employees.
We're joined by Ryan Hunt, the Chief Executive Officer of Michigan Works Association, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information at michiganworks.org. That's Michigan Works. How does inflation play into the job market at this time? For employers, I would imagine that means a lot higher costs, which means a lot less cash flow, lower revenue, less money to spend, particularly on employment, which then for employees looking to seek these jobs, they may have better opportunities. They may have opportunities for better pay in a similar position that's maybe a little bit lower in a company somewhere else than with certain companies. So just overall, what role has inflation played in this, and how long do you project, or does Michigan Works project, this could have an impact on employers and therefore on potential employees?
Man, that is a great question. I do not pretend to be an economist, and I did not sleep at a Holiday Inn last night, but I'll do my best to answer those questions for you, at least what we're seeing right now and kind of what we're hearing from some of our subject matter experts on the topic of inflation. Consumer demand has not slowed down. So even though we're seeing inflation and the rising cost of goods and services across the board, not only for individual families to afford the basic necessities, but also for cost of goods and services for businesses to be able to do their jobs and for workers to be able to do their jobs. That consumer demand is helping to kind of offset some of the inflationary dynamics that you may typically see ahead of perhaps a slight or deep recession in a state or national economy. But because of that consumer demand, companies are still hiring. We're not seeing really any slowdown in the job market right now. We're still having a number of companies in a range of industries that are continuously hiring, looking for that next best and brightest talent. And for workers as well, that inflation has led to an increase in wages, which you would think is oftentimes a good thing for wages to be able to increase. The problem that we're running into now that we're seeing here in the US and across the globe is inflation is actually rising faster than wage increases are. But now we're also running into the dynamic where companies who have been raising their wages for the last couple of years cannot afford to raise their wages much more without cutting into that bottom line. So what the future holds for us here in Michigan and across the national economy, I think is yet to be seen. Because of that consumer demand, I think we'll see that inflation will continue, maybe not at the level of 8.5% like we saw in March. I know some economists are projecting that the inflation will start to perhaps dip a little bit, which will provide hopefully some relief for the cost of basic goods and necessities for individuals and their families. The other dynamic we have to think about as well, we had a recession back in 2007, 2008, 2009. Michigan was one of the states that was hit hardest across the entire nation when it came to the Great Recession a little over a decade ago. I think the difference in dynamics this time around is the job shortages that companies are running into, where they have a shortage of workers, but they have a number of different job openings. And we've seen over the course of the pandemic quite a few, millions of people that have retired and maybe expedited their retirement because of the pandemic. And we're not expecting those individuals to reengage in the economy. So even if we do see a slight slowdown in the hiring of employees, maybe it's just simply that companies won't hire as many people as they would have necessarily projected due to any particular slowdown. That also may just be the optimist in me, but I'm hopeful that as a nation and as a state, we can weather any storm that is coming due because of the inflationary dynamic. But at the end of the day, we're here to support the job seekers and in order to upskill themselves to better support their individual lives and their families. We're also here to support the businesses who are looking to hire those individuals as well, whether, regardless of the inflation rate right now. But I know that we're tracking that very carefully, and I know that it will have significant impact probably in the medium term, I would say, here in Michigan, not necessarily any short-term fixes. And I'm scared to make any long-term projections, but I would say inflation is certainly here to serve as a dynamic impacting labor force participation here in Michigan and nationally, probably, at least for the next several months, if not longer.
Ryan, anything else that we should be keeping in mind right now in terms of Michigan Works' opportunity to help employers and employees alike?
Sure. Again, I mentioned this at the very beginning of the interview today. Workforce development is a critical component to ensuring that Michigan remains on the track toward long-term economic resiliency. We're starting to get into budget discussions here in Michigan for fiscal year 23, also talking with federal lawmakers about appropriations for the upcoming fiscal year as it relates to workforce development. Again, we encourage both job seekers and companies to communicate and contact their local Michigan Works office. there are a number of different resources and opportunities to help offset the cost of training, perhaps even eliminate or lower some barriers that individuals may be running into when it comes to sustained employability. One program that we've had a huge amount of success over the past 6 or 7 years here in Michigan is the Going Pro Talent Fund, formerly known as the Skilled Trades Training Fund. That program last year in fiscal year 22 was funded at $40 million throughout the state of Michigan. That program helps companies offset the cost of training. They can receive a reimbursement of up to $1,500 per eligible trainee or up to $3,000 per new apprentice at their company. And we expect to continue supporting that program in fiscal year 23 and beyond, thanks to the support. It's actually really a bipartisan support, not only from the governor's office, but on both sides of the aisle in the state house and the state senate. And so for companies, again, that's just another resource that they can utilize to help upskill their employees and really help enrich the corporate culture at their company to reinvest in their workers.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Whether you're the city,
the county,
or the Huron River Watershed Council.
As partners working together to protect our water resources, we agree.
Pet waste is the source of harmful bacteria in the Huron River.
When it's left on the ground, it can wash into the storm drains.
These lead directly to our streams. No filters, no treatment.
Here's one thing we know that can help keep our water clean.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
So pick up pet waste and trash it.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
Who is struggling right now?
I am.
My son is.
Many are struggling with anxiety, depression, and substance use. Before it becomes a crisis, reach out to MyCal, the Michigan Crisis and Access Line for free confidential support 24/7. Available in the Upper Peninsula and Oakland County. Just call or text 1-844-44-MyCal or chat online at michigan.gov/MyCal. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Motorcyclists are hard to see. To keep everyone safer, it's important to always look for them and know where most crashes occur. 84% of motorcycle and vehicle crashes happen on streets, not highways. And most crashes with motorcyclists occur when vehicle drivers are turning left. So before turning, especially to the left, make sure you look for motorcyclists. Then look again. It could save a life.
To Sophia and Gabriel. Even though these old knees can't follow on your adventure to the forest today, these flowers represent my love. These stitches and threads join us together. And wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
72.7% of high school students get less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. This can cause pain, obesity, and can very negatively affect your mental health. When you have a consistent 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day, you get sick less often, lose more weight, and have better relationships with those around you. For more information about the dangers of sleep deprivation, go to sleepfoundation.org. This message is brought to you by the WBHS Digital Media Arts Program and 89.3 Lakes FM.
Can I ask you a question? Why did you get your kids vaccinated?
It was hard for them to social distance, to be isolated from their friends.
I want them to get back to school and sports games. So as a pediatrician, I recommend the vaccine to everyone I know.
The boys lost a former teammate and classmate who was only 20 years old. It's been a devastating year.
We want to get back to normalcy. Our daughter is really looking forward to being with her friends, being a kid.
Welcome back to the Michigan Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe. To learn more about the program on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you'll also find more information about everywhere that we broadcast live and live to tape Monday through Friday each and every week, and find all of our full programs and each individual interview on demand. civiccentertv.com/megacast. The NBA regular season is over. The playoffs are in full swing once again. The Detroit Pistons are on the outside looking in. They will be in the draft lottery again and have a high chance of receiving either a top 3 pick or a top 4 pick, and have the third highest chance of receiving the number 1 overall pick, which would be for the second consecutive year. To talk about the Pistons offseason and where they may be going in the 2022-2023 season, we're pleased to be joined once again by the Pistons beat writer with MLive Media Group, Lauren Williams, on the Michigan Megacast. Lauren, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tyler.
Appreciate having you on. So the Pistons finished up their 2021-2022 season with a record of 23-59, 14th place in the Eastern Conference, and the third worst record in the NBA. They will have a very high chance at the number 1 overall pick for the second consecutive year. This year, their highest projections are in the 3 to 4 range, but they could fall as low as about 7th in the draft lottery. Should that happen. Regardless, they're going to end up with a high lottery pick. They got a lot of cap space this offseason. So going into the offseason, and in your conversations with Dwayne Casey, in your conversations with GM Troy Weaver, and others in the management of the Detroit Pistons, what are their overall goals going into this offseason? What's kind of framing their reference for where this team needs to go in the future?
I think one of the things that really has stuck out to me in talking with Troy Weaver is that he always thinks about the person before the player and making sure that he's finding the right group of people who are going to fit what the Pistons' missions are. I mean, when we spoke to him at his end of season availability last week, he mentioned that, yes, while they're going to be aggressive in, their pursuit of the right free agents, at the end of the day, they want somebody who's going to fit the core values of what the Pistons are trying to do. And that's someone who's a hard worker, someone who's going to dive for loose balls, someone who's going to really put it all out there, just like the group of players that they have had this season. But obviously they want to take it to the next level, so the player has to be talented.
It can be really tough for a team to lose as many games as the Pistons did, almost 60 games, 59 losses this season, to be in many of those games, similar to last season, where they're in many of those games, they're competitive, and they're just coming up short, to miss the playoffs once again. So from the player's perspective, especially with the team being relatively young, not a lot of guys that have been on the roster for a very long time, what are their thoughts coming out of this season and looking forward to the future?
I think they all kind of, except for Cade, I think, they all kind of understood what this year was about. I know Cade mentioned earlier in the season that he wanted to get the team to the playoffs. And, he quickly learned that winning in the NBA is a lot harder than it might have been at the college level or the AAU level or high school or anything like that. So I think a lot of them, want to pick up on the momentum that they kind of built toward the end of the year. They really want to take that kind of winning habits that they started to lock in on toward the end of the season and take it with them into the off season as well as into the future. I really do get the sense that a lot of them are very optimistic about what next year will hold for them. A lot of them are really interested in really kind of stepping up their off season programs, playing pickup basketball, as Killian Hayes mentioned, and kind of playing a little bit more freely to kind of get locked into the mission that they're trying to do.
We're joined by Lauren Williams, beat writer for the Detroit Pistons with MLive Media Group, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. We mentioned Cade Cunningham, a first overall pick in last year's NBA draft. This season for the Pistons, 17 points, about 5-6 assists, shooting 31% from the field, and very, very high impact player for the Pistons in just 64 games played. Of course, he had those early season injury issues, and of course the Pistons are not in the playoffs, not even in the play-in, similar to a couple of other players that were in contention or very close to that, and Scotty Barnes and Evan Mobley, the other two finalists for the Rookie of the Year. In comparison, 15 points, about 8 rebounds and 4 assists for Scotty Barnes of the Toronto Raptors, and for Evan Mobley of the Cleveland Cavaliers. 15 points for him on the year, 8.3 rebounds and about 3 assists and 2 blocks for Evan Mobley, who is the early favorite at this moment in time to win the Rookie of the Year. And it's been an interesting debate that's popped up in NBA circles and sports circles regarding the Rookie of the Year. You think about Cade Cunningham's play, especially late in the season. High-impact player, numbers that you don't typically see from veteran players that late in the season, especially on a team like the Pistons in this year, versus guys like Evan Mobley, who obviously had high impact on that team. They were in contention for the playoffs. They were in the play-in. Scotty Barnes also helped the Raptors make a big jump this year in their quick rebuild and retooling. So in your opinion, should the team's success play a major role in whether or not a player wins Rookie of the Year, whether or not a player wins MVP, Most Improved Player, or any of these other awards, or should it be based more solely on the performance of that individual player for that individual role it's being awarded for?
In my opinion, if you're awarding individual season awards, it really should come down to what the individual player did. I understand why a lot of people like to take a holistic approach to how they argue why a certain player should win a certain award. But if you're looking at the criteria of who was the best rookie, or who was the most improved player, or who was the defensive player of the year, you really should be looking at the individual and not necessarily the team's record or standing, or whether they had an impact on getting their team to the playoffs. I think if you limit yourself to just looking at players who get their teams to the playoffs, you're going to eliminate a lot of other players from the field. So I really do think it should come down to individual performance. But again, I understand the argument of, looking at a team's record.
And you think about it too from the perspective of impact, especially for players that are in the MVP race and the Rookie of the Year race, Most Improved Player. I personally think of it as, what would this team be like without this player? If you have an MVP candidate, how successful would this team be without the MVP for the Rookie of the Year? I think about the Pistons, the Raptors, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Where would they be without the finalists for Rookie of the Year? The Toronto Raptors probably would be in a similar spot, maybe 5-10 losses more than what they did have without a guy like Scotty Barnes. That's a significant impact. That should play a role in this. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, they are on the cusp of a playoff spot. They're in the play-in game. They're probably late lottery without Evan Mobley, especially considering the play of Darius Garland this season, the resurgence of Kevin Love and his new role as a sixth man. Played a big role, and they had a very successful season with and without Evan Mobley on the floor. Then you look at the Detroit Pistons and the impact that Cade Cunningham had. I don't think they get 23 wins. I don't think they get close to that without Cade Cunningham, especially those late season games where teams are really picking it up heading toward the playoffs. I think that should be the main factor in especially the Rookie of the Year, which is, I would say, the least of the impactful metrics in the award season for impact of a player on a team. Rookie of the Year is one of those where you really can just look at the bare gameplay of an individual player, and obviously I have some bias here. I think Cade Cunningham should win that award. I'm a Detroit Pistons fan. That's nothing to discount Evan Mobley or Scotty Barnes, but if you look at the team impact, I don't think any one of those three players made a bigger impact on their team this year, or is going to make a bigger impact on their team in the years to come than Cade Cunningham.
And I think when you think about it too, it's, Evan Mobley had 2 All-Stars that surrounded him, several former All-Stars that surrounded him. Same with Scotty Barnes. He had a couple of All-Stars that, were around him, whereas Cade Cunningham was shouldering a lot of the team leading or the leadership role that this team needed. And that's not to discount the leadership qualities that Scotty Barnes and Evan Mobley have, but when you have someone who is the floor general, who impacts the offense on so many different levels, you can look at his plus minus when he's off the floor versus on the floor, and it's a huge difference. So I think that should play a huge role into why he should win the Rookie of the Year. And again, I'm a little bit biased since I cover the team and I watch him almost every single night. But I think that is an important factor. I believe there were 3 and 19 when he wasn't playing, and then they were like 17 and I can't remember the total number off the top of my head right this second, but he played a major role. So I think that should count for a lot more, the leadership qualities that he possessed and the fact that he was a connector with so many different parts of that lineup. I think that should play a role.
We're joined by Lauren Williams, beat writer for the Detroit Pistons with MLive. You can read her articles on mlive.com/Pistons as you follow the Pistons in this 2022 offseason. The draft lottery will play a big impact on that offseason. Free agency with the amount of cap space they have will play a big role in this offseason as well. And one of the big questions, we've mentioned this earlier, we talked about this previously, when we've had you on the Megacast, is Jeremy Grant. That's a big question mark for the Pistons going into this offseason. Do they move Jeremy Grant? Does he continue to play for the Pistons and play out that last year of his contract where he's making a little bit over $20 million for the Pistons and could continue, presumably, to be their starting power forward or even play in a small forward role, depending on who is drafted to this team from the NBA draft. But there are teams that have expressed interest in Jeremy Grant, particularly the one that's getting a lot of discussion in the rumor mill is the Portland Trail Blazers, who had previously allegedly said that they were willing to part with their lottery pick if it would help them in acquiring Jeremy Grant. You put 2 high lottery picks, somewhere around the 7 to 10 range from the Portland Trail Blazers and the 1 to 7 range for the Detroit Pistons. That is a huge accelerant to your rebuild. That changes all your strategy. So for the Pistons, at this moment in time, from your discussions with the front office and with those internally in the front office of the Detroit Pistons, what is their interest level in potentially moving Jeremy Grant, or what would they really be looking for to make a trade of one of those key guys in their locker room?
I think they're going to exhaust all of their options. Troy Weaver kind of alluded to it again at the end of his his end of season availability that, he didn't expect that they were going to get a lot of phone calls, but you can expect him to at least answer the phone call and listen to what people have to say. I think if there's the option to have another lottery pick added, then, he might explore that option. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to make sure that he's doing what he can to find the right fits for this team. And if he decides that Jeremy long-term is the right fit for this team, then that's the option that they're going to go with.
Yeah, I think that the draft lottery plays the biggest role in that, because if the Pistons have a top 3 pick, you're getting an impact player that, especially if you're number 1 or number 1 through 3, you're going to get an impact player. Those presumable top 3 picks are all big men, 2 power forwards, 1 center. A couple of them can play either power forward or center, and guys like Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith Jr., Paolo Banchero from Duke as well. That could be a big impact. All of a sudden, you have your power forward of the future, your big 3, 4, 5 player of the future, and maybe Jeremy Grant isn't necessarily a big part of that. You can think about moving him, especially if a team's offering you another first-round pick. Then again, I think the more likely scenario where they would explore that would be if they fall in the draft lottery. All of a sudden, you're out of that place where you got 3 guys that are really considered to be almost sure things, as much as you can have a sure thing in any draft class in a position of need. Now you have a little bit more of a question mark there. Do you take a shooting guard? Do you reach a little bit for another big man? 2 lottery picks in that position really help you in developing your team into the future without necessarily being married to, this guy's got to be our power forward of the future. This guy's got to be our 2 guard or our point guard of the future. I think that's going to have the biggest impact on the Jeremy Grant decision. For the Pistons in the lottery, we talk about those 3 guys, Jabari Smith Jr., Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren, who's considered to be the top player in this draft. Of those 3, in your opinion, who do you believe would be the best fit for this Pistons team?
Personally, I think it's so tough because I like all of them. I know one of the biggest question marks when it came to Paolo was whether he'd be a defensive fit. But when you have guys like Cade Cunningham, Sadiq, and even Isaiah Stewart, who would be kind of paired alongside him, that would kind of help to bring him along and kind of fill in the blanks where his defensive weaknesses kind of show. And as he gets older, he's going to continue developing those skills. And Dwayne Casey is a defensive-minded coach. So this might be the best environment for him if you're trying to develop that side of his game. Now, we like Jabari Smith just because we see that he's been a proven shooter. The Pistons need scoring. I mean, Troy Weaver kind of joked about it a little bit. He doesn't care how it gets into the hoop, whether it's a 3, whether it's a 2, whether it's a free throw. He just wants somebody who can get the ball in the basket. And then with Chet, he's what they call the unicorn, right? He has so many different instinctive plays that he's made with Gonzaga, as one of their best rim protectors. And if you pair him alongside with Isaiah Stewart can kind of mask that strength question that a lot of people have when it comes to Chet. And as he gets older and kind of develops that man strength, as people might say, he's going to be a problem, as a lot of people like to say colloquially, in the league. So it's a really tough choice. I think either of those 3 guys would be a great fit alongside the team. I think one of the big things is when they fall out of the top three is, who do they take? And they have to be careful with that choice just because they want to make sure that they don't take the ball completely out of Cade Cunningham's hands.
And I think with the three guys that are really considered to be at the top of this draft class, should the Pistons get into the top three, have a chance at one of these guys, maybe even in the top four if one of them falls out, let's say. Then you have a question. You mentioned the potential pairing of a guy like Chet Holmgren with Isaiah Stewart, and how Holmgren's what he lacks on the defensive side of the ball and what he lacks in physicality could maybe be made up for, particularly in the post, with Isaiah Stewart. I think that really comes down to the question for the Pistons. Where do they see Isaiah Stewart fitting into the fold in the future? Is he their starting center? We know he's undersized. He's a physical dynamo. He's a great rebounder and excellent defender. But where does he fit in the future of this Pistons starting lineup in particular? Or is he a interior booster on the bench in that second unit? Could he be that kind of spark plug off the bench in the post defensively? I think that's a big question for the Pistons. Where do they see Isaiah Stewart? Is he their center of the future, or is he their center for now and then a guy that can be a really solid depth guy down the line?
I think you see him as a guy of the future. I mean, they traded up to get the 16th pick to get him. I think Troy Weaver sees a lot of value, especially because he's a guy that can eventually shoot the ball. I know he didn't take as many three-pointer shots, in the beginning of the year, just because Dwayne Casey really wanted him to focus on his bread and butter, which was rebounding and setting those screens. And we really saw him come into his own with that, especially freeing up space for Cade and some of the other guards to get to the basket. Now, I think that with Chet, again, he's going to be paired with very, very strong guys on the floor, with Cade, with Sadiq, with Isaiah. So I think you're going to have a lot of flexibility with Isaiah Stewart on the roster, just because you can move him up or you can move him down. I mean, same with Marvin Bagley. They also have him that they have to think about, and whether or not they're going to tender an offer to him. So, I think that what this Pistons roster really values is versatility. And with all of those guys, that's what they're going to get.
Do you think the Pistons are going to make that big splash in free agency this offseason? I know we talked about it previously, that it's seeing, and you had said previously you think it's one more year of kind of really bolstering that depth and then getting to that big splash. But with the cap space the Pistons have, with some of the available positions that have really talented players in the free agency pool for this offseason, guys I think of immediately are DeAndre Ayton. We've heard a lot about Miles Bridges, which I kind of wave off because we have Sadiq Bey here. Miles Bridges is a 3. You're going to presumably be able to draft a high-caliber 4 if you're in the top 3 in this draft lottery. The guy that would make the most sense if you're going to make that big splash is DeAndre Ayton, who, by the way, is a restricted free agent. So Phoenix, surging right now, #1 record in the NBA, playing great basketball in the playoffs. They may want to bring him back and continue on the surge, and they may be willing to fork over that max contract that they've previously said they're not really interested in providing, or have not shown any interest in providing to DeAndre Ayton. So for the Pistons, if they have a guy like Ayton who is available, they could maybe snag away from Phoenix with a contract that the Suns would see as unfavorable, or another big-time free agent out there that could be that next big catalyst for the next step in the rebuild. Do you think this is the offseason that the Pistons take that, or are they going to be a little more cautious and continue that slow burn of a build one more year, and then next offseason would be that surge point?
I have a hard time seeing Phoenix actually parting ways with DeAndre Ayton. Just as you mentioned, they're making that surge. They're the top team in the West right now. They're one of the top teams in the NBA in general. So I have a really hard time seeing them parting ways. But again, it all depends on what happens in the draft, right? And what they decide the direction is that they're going to go. Chris Paul isn't getting any younger, and he's still, really trying to go after that ring. And the fact that he has kind of fast-tracked that process of getting them into the top position in the league to make a couple of finals runs is a big thing. So I can't see them parting ways with Ayton unless something huge happens that changes his mind, or he just really wants to get out or anything like that. Now, I can't even though the Pistons have said that they're going to be, particularly Troy Weaver has said that he's going to be aggressive in terms of, turning over every stone in free agency, I don't think this is the year that we see the huge splash. I think they have a lot of free agents who have team options this year, and, a couple of free agents that have player options. So I think, we're going to see a little bit more of a slow burn, just this one more year, and maybe next year is the year that they make that splashy signing, just because, again, this is still about development. They're still going to get some young players in, and the front office is really going to want to have that variety of age, experience, and youth on the roster.
Lauren, really early on in the offseason, but there's always a story, especially with a rebuilding team like the Pistons, that are really close to making that next big jump and potentially next year being in contention for a playoff spot, that 7th, 8th, maybe 6th seed in the playoffs next year. If they play their cards right and the development goes right over this offseason and next season. Any stories at this moment in time as we're entering the offseason, as we're in the thick of playoff time, that you're following regarding the Pistons?
I think the big thing is just the draft and free agency. I think a lot of people have their eyes on that just because they do want to see the team get to the next level, excuse me. And, Troy Weaver has said he's never going to put a cap on what this rebuild means. He's thinking long term, not just one and done, we make the finals and that's it, or we get to the championship and that's it. He wants to create a sustainable winning franchise. And to him, that means just kind of taking your time and making sure that you're making the right choices as possible. So one name that I think has caught a lot of people's attention is James Edwards actually reported that the Pistons are interested in Jalen Brunson. So I think that's one person that we should keep an eye on as the playoffs continue. And he's with the Dallas Mavericks, and now the series is tied up at 1-1 with the Utah Jazz. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he and Luka continue to kind of push that team forward and see where they end up as the playoffs unfold.
Yeah, quite a way to solve that point guard question there in the starting lineup for the Pistons, and put Killian Hayes potentially in that point guard spot off the bench, where he seemed to thrive at the end of the season. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All of our articles on MLive's website, mlive.com/Pistons, to keep up with everything from the Detroit Pistons in this very important offseason and this rebuild. Lauren will be on the front lines, keeping you up to date on everything going on in the Pistons organization this offseason. We're going to take a break here on the Michigan Megacast. On the other side, we will stay in the Detroit area, and we'll speak with one of nearly 300 Share Detroit-supported charities and nonprofits impacting the Detroit community. We'll speak with Cass Fry, one of the co-founders of Detroit Chempreneurist, next on the Michigan Megacast.
It's the Great Lakes water, and so what people do ends up in our waterways.
Flushable wipes are just evil. They should be thrown away. They're impossible to destroy, and they can cause significant problems.
One of the main things when you're cooking is to not dump fats, oils, and greases down your drains.
They stick to the sides of pipes. They stick to everything they come in contact with. Don't put it down the sink.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
Joining us now is Cass Fry, the co-founder of Detroit Chempreneurist, Share Detroit-supported charity and nonprofit, with us on the Michigan Megacast. Cass, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Appreciate having you on. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to co-found this organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Cass Fry, and I'm a chemist and an entrepreneur, as well as a co-founder, board member, and the personal care chemistry instructor of Detroit Chempreneurist. So I received my degree in chemistry and biological science from Wayne State University. And from there, I've worked in the cosmetic and pharmaceutical industry for nearly a decade. And I've always had a passion for learning and sharing my knowledge. And that's really what led me to co-found Detroit Chempreneurist.
And so let's talk about the name of the organization, Detroit Chempreneurist. What is the goal of this organization? I'm getting it's chemistry, it's a little bit about entrepreneurship. What ultimately is your organization hoping to accomplish out in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit of a play on words. As you can see, we can pull out the chemist and the entrepreneur. So our program focuses teaching students chemistry and entrepreneurship. So we utilize those two main topics to come up with our name. We are based in Detroit, so we included the Detroit, but one day we hope to have chempreneurists all over the country and all over the world. We formed in November of 2020, and we are a 501(c) nonprofit organization. I'm a co-founder. We also have another co-founder, Brittany Mitchell-Kelly. And the reason that we kind of came together and formed this organization is we both noticed different problems in our industry. In my industry, I was noticing a significant lack of diversity. Not only were women underrepresented in the cosmetic and personal care industry, but also Black, Indigenous, and people of color were underrepresented in the industry. And I found that these business owners who were selling cosmetic and personal care products to consumers did not look like the people who were buying those products. Brittany is an educator and a social worker, and so she's been in the teaching in the schools for almost a decade as well. And one of the things that she noticed is overall in schools, there is a focus on standardized testing. So a lot of the science and different programs get pushed to the side, especially around the time of the test and getting prepared for the test and making sure that students can study and are prepared for those exams. And so in 2014, Brittany and some of my other fellow educator friends started to bring me into their classrooms to speak to the students about what I was doing. And from there, that kind of just spiraled into eventually creating this organization after going into these classrooms and seeing the impact that we were having with the students and the interest they had in this topic that they didn't even know existed, and they look at the personal care products or the cosmetic products that they use every day. They never think that a chemist has to develop this product or a graphic designer has to design this container. And so through that and those interactions, we really formed Detroit Chempreneurist. And our overall goal is to expose students through an after school and summer program to personal care chemistry and entrepreneurship, with the idea that not only could they be a chemist one day, but they could be an entrepreneur and start their own business. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to create these cosmetic products. A lot of the entrepreneurial skill sets that we teach are applicable throughout all of life.
More information on their website, DetroitChempreneurist.org. That's DetroitChempreneurist.org, or by visiting ShareDetroit.org, where they are listed as one of nearly 300 charities and nonprofits in the Detroit area supported on the Share Detroit platform. And so, as you're going into these classrooms, as your organization is interacting with these kids and attempting to inspire an interest in science, an interest in entrepreneurship, combining those two interests together, even in some senses, with today's kids and all the distractions in their classrooms and all the difficulties that are associated with modern day education. Do you find that it's still something that kids can get really interested in really quickly when you're applying some of these real world concepts to the science that they're learning in school each and every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we see is kids are really interested in making their own money. They're already starting to think about what am I going to do when I'm older, and they want to buy things like toys and candy and all of those great things. So really being able to say, hey, you can have your own business and you don't have to wait to do it. You can start it right now in middle school or high school, and it doesn't, like you said, have to be a science business. It could be walking dogs, right? It could be selling snacks and things like that. But starting to learn about how to do market research, how to pitch your business, how to focus on different investment opportunities out there and what does that look like. And then also with the chemistry side of things, being able to make a product that you can use yourself. So I made my own body scrubber. I made bath bombs for my family and friends. Kids get really excited and interested in that.
We're joined by Cass Fry there, the co-founder of Detroit Chempreneurist, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on the organization by visiting their website, DetroitChempreneurist.org. That's DetroitChempreneurist.org, or by visiting ShareDetroit.org and searching under their charities and nonprofits listing for Detroit Chempreneurist. That is Detroit Chempreneurist. And so, you mentioned multiple times personal care chemistry. Can you define that for us and how that is applied out in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. I often hear, that's one of the big questions, what is personal care chemistry? A lot of people think they haven't heard of it. We're really talking about those personal care products and those cosmetic products. And so the science behind those products, what are the different properties that those products have? How are those properties applicable to your skin and to using them on your body? And as well as the properties behind the individual ingredients. And so once students can understand the different ingredients, they're able to actually formulate products utilizing those properties and those ingredients.
We're joined by Cass Fry there, the co-founder of Detroit Chempreneurist, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. And so you mentioned that there are summer programs through Detroit Chempreneurist, and that your organization also goes into classrooms throughout the year. If educators would like to get involved with Detroit Chempreneurist and get them into their classrooms, or potentially engage their students in their summer programs, how can they go about doing so?
Yeah, so they can head to our website, www.detroitchempreneurist.org. We do have a contact submission form, so they can complete that information and send it over to us, and we would, reach back out to them and connect. You can also email us at info@detroitchempreneurist.org, and we can connect that way as well.
That's info@detroitchempreneurist.org. We're joined by Cass Fry, co-founder of Detroit Chempreneurist, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on their website, detroitchempreneurist.org, and by visiting sharedetroit.org, where they are one of nearly 300 charities and nonprofits supported by the Share Detroit platform, currently at 291 charities and nonprofits supported at this time. And so there are a number of different ways beyond just getting your classrooms involved or getting your children involved with Detroit Chempreneurist, that the community can help support this effort and support STEM and STEAM programs in their community. What are some ways that those in the community that would like to help your organization continue its message and continue its impact on the community, for them to be able to participate themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple of things going on right now. We are hosting a cell phone fundraiser that is going on until August 7th. We are collecting used cell phones. The only requirement is it must have a battery. So if you have a BlackBerry or a Razr laying around, from 10 years ago, or maybe you just got the latest iPhone and you're not sure what to do with that recent version, we are accepting those. Those cell phones will be utilized. We'll be returning them to a recycling center to receive funds for scholarships. We are hosting a back-to-school scholarship event in the fall, and it'll be a competition with a arts, science, and pitch categories. Students will be able to compete for those scholarships through all the cell phone funds that we collect. We also actively are accepting donations. We utilize DonorBox, PayPal, Facebook Charity. If you're not interested in donating cash, we do have an Amazon wish list available. You could also add us as an Amazon Smile charity. So if you're actively purchasing on Amazon, you can use smile.amazon.com and select us as your charity. We also are looking for volunteers within our program, so not just monetary. We actively are seeking guest speakers, so we bring in different STEAM professionals to our programs to speak to the students. We also host a webinar series every second Saturday. We started it in February of this year, and it goes all the way through December. So the second Saturday from 12 to 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, we have different web series. You can tune in. Some of the previous topics we've done were Black women in entrepreneurship. We did disability employment resources and awareness, as well as women in STEAM. And some of the upcoming events that we have are related to mental health awareness, as well as LGBTQ plus individuals in STEAM. And then other things that you could do is simply volunteering. So if you would like to volunteer in some of our workshops, volunteer and work with our students and share some of your knowledge and information, we would love that as well.
More information on their website, detroitchempreneurist.org. You can also send them an email at info@detroitchempreneurist.org, or call them 313-536-0714. That's 313-536-0714. And Cass, before we let you go, just for reference for the summer programs, but also for those educators that either later on in the school year, as it approaches its end this year, or next school year, would like to have Detroit Chempreneurist be in their classroom. Can you take us through briefly just the experience of that day or that opportunity, and what the kids will experience and learn in that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So our program is very dynamic, and in that sense, we meet the organization where they are. So they can sign up from anywhere from 2 lessons, so that's simply 1 personal care chemistry lesson and 1 entrepreneurship lesson, all the way up to 8 lessons on each subject. We offer these lessons, we can do them in a half hour, we can do them up to 2-hour lessons. So depending on how much content you want to get and how in-depth you want to get with the curriculum, we have flexibility. We've done things once a week, twice a week. So really, it's all up to the organization and what their schedule looks like and what their individual needs are. Now, within the program, the more lessons an organization signs up with, the more, again, in-depth that content is. So on the personal care chemistry side of things, you're going to get an introduction into personal care chemistry. You're going to get an introduction into formulation and mixing instructions. We do activities like make body scrubs for that, so students can have something tangible. From there, we continue to learn about different properties of those products. So we do a lesson on pH. We do a lesson on mixtures and solutions and all of the different types of mixtures and categories of mixtures out there. Then we continue on, we learn about extraction and concentration, where we make a natural dye, and we actually utilize that dye in our next lesson to make a bath bomb. And then finally, we conclude our programming in chemistry by starting to design and develop our own personal care products. So whether that's inspired by a product that you use, or maybe it's a whole new product that's not on the market that you've created, students have that opportunity. On the flip side, in entrepreneurship, we're going to learn about different types of businesses that you can form. We're going to learn about how to do market research. We're going to talk about empathy and how important that is as being an entrepreneur. And then from there, we're going to continue to develop and grow these skill sets of entrepreneurs all the way through a business model canvas and pitching our products or our business idea to stakeholders and investors.
Cass, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I do want to give a shout out to Share Detroit for the opportunity as well to be here.
Big thank you to Cass Fry and all of our guests on today's Megacast. Find all those interviews and each full episode on our website, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Big thank you to our crew as well, our technical director, Calvin Brown, Zoom producer, Jared Clark, our producer, Larry Nyland, the king of television himself, and Maddie Mushkin out at Master Control, helping us on and off the air each and every day. Again, special programming today from My Michigan TV coming up live with Steve Lado and Larry Nyland from the Grand Traverse Resort and Spa. Coming up next on My Michigan TV, we'll return tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.